Welcome, everyone, to Six Path Weeb. Today, we dive into a dark and chaotic alternate reality where destiny takes a completely different turn. What if Naruto didn't walk the path of a hero, but embraced the power of the dark side instead? What if Darth Naruko awakened the legendary Rinne Sharingan, a power feared across worlds, capable of reshaping fate itself? In this story, alliances will crumble, gods will fall, and the ninja world will witness a force beyond imagination. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The content on this channel is created for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any anime footage, music, or copyrighted material used in my videos. Full rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now then, prepare yourselves for a journey into power, betrayal, and absolute destruction. Let the story begin. Tatooine stretched endlessly beneath the blazing twin suns, its golden dunes shimmering like waves upon a vast ocean of sand. Heat danced in the air, bending the horizon into watery illusions, while towering stone cliffs stood silent beneath the cloudless sky. Then the silence broke. A streak of light tore across the heavens, blazing like a falling star. It rushed downward with a thunderous roar, scattering sand in every direction as it descended toward the desert floor. Inside that streak of light was a girl. Her name was Naruko. Her bright blonde hair whipped wildly around her face as she tumbled through the air. Her orange and black jacket fluttered behind her like a flag caught in a storm. Though bruised and exhausted, she still clenched her teeth with stubborn determination. "Okay," she muttered weakly, "this could definitely be going better." The ground rushed closer. 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 Whump. Naruko crashed into the desert sand with a tremendous puff of dust. She bounced once, twice, then rolled down a small dune before finally coming to a stop flat on her back. For several long moments, she simply lay there staring up at the sky. Except, something felt strange. Naruko blinked. There were two suns. Huh? She slowly sat up, wincing as every muscle in her body protested. Sand slid from her sleeves while warm desert wind brushed against her cheeks. "This definitely isn't the land of wind," she said quietly. Inside her mind came a familiar gruff voice. "You finally noticed, kid?" Naruko smiled faintly despite herself. "Kurama," she whispered. The great fox spirit appeared within her thoughts, enormous orange tail swaying behind him. His sharp eyes narrowed with concern, though his voice softened. "You scared me," he said. "Falling from the sky like that isn't exactly safe." Naruko rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. "Yeah. Sorry about that." Kurama snorted. "You always apologize after the dangerous part." That earned a tired laugh from her. Even after everything they had been through together, Kurama still stayed by her side. Somehow, hearing his voice made the strange desert feel a little less lonely. Naruko carefully pushed herself to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she stayed standing this time. The endless dunes stretched around her in every direction. Strange rocky spires rose from the sands like ancient guardians, and far away she could just barely make out tiny buildings clustered together beneath the sunlight. A town. "Well," Naruko said, brushing dust from her jacket, "guess we should figure out where we are." Kurama's ears twitched thoughtfully. "There are people nearby," he said. "And machines. Lots of them." "Machines?" Naruko tilted her head. Before Kurama could answer, a faint humming sound drifted across the desert wind. Naruko turned. A small floating robot bobbed over the dunes toward her. It was shaped like a shiny silver ball with a dome on top, chirping cheerfully as it approached. Beep boop beep. Naruko blinked in surprise. The little robot spun in a happy circle. Naruko crouched slightly. "Hi?" The robot answered with another excited whistle. Kurama grumbled inside her mind. "Why do strange things always find you?" Naruko grinned. "Because I'm awesome." The robot rolled around her feet curiously before projecting a tiny blue map into the air. Naruko stared wide-eyed at the glowing image. "That is so cool." The robot chirped proudly. Naruko laughed warmly for the first time since arriving in the desert. Somehow, despite the unfamiliar world around her, she felt a spark of excitement rising inside her chest. Maybe this strange place wasn't so bad after all. She placed her hands on her hips and smiled toward the distant horizon. "All right then, Tatooine," she declared brightly. "Looks like you've got a new visitor." And beneath the twin suns, Naruko began her adventure. She blinked, brushing a bead of sweat from her eyes. Naruko could feel the grains of sand beneath her back, warm and soft like tiny glowing embers beneath the twin suns overhead. The air shimmered with heat, and every breath tasted of dust and sunlight. Hot. It was far too hot. For a long moment, she stayed where she was, staring upward at the endless sky. Her body ached from exhaustion, and her thoughts felt tangled and heavy. Everything she had known was gone, scattered like sand in the wind. Even Kurama, usually loud and impatient, remained strangely quiet within her mind. Naruko closed her eyes again. Then a voice reached her. "Are you all right?" Her blue eyes fluttered open. A young woman stood above her, shaded by the sunlight behind her. Long dark hair swayed gently in the desert breeze, framing a kind face filled with concern. For a dizzy second, Naruko thought the suns themselves had leaned down to speak to her. Kurama finally stirred. "Well now," the fox rumbled thoughtfully. "Looks like someone found us." Naruko pushed herself upright with a groan. Sand slid from her clothes as she blinked away the haze in her vision. The stranger knelt beside her carefully, holding out a small canteen of water. "Here," she said softly. "Drink slowly." Naruko accepted it with grateful hands. The water was warm, but it felt wonderful against her dry throat. "Thanks," she croaked. The woman smiled, and somehow that smile made the harsh desert feel a little less lonely. "My name is Shmi Skywalker," she said. "I heard a loud crash nearby and came to look." Naruko looked around at the endless dunes stretching in every direction. Pieces of metal and scorched debris lay half buried nearby, remnants of the strange journey that had brought her here. "Tatooine," Kurama muttered. "Well, this is certainly different." Naruko rubbed the back of her neck sheepishly. "Guess I made a pretty big mess, huh?" Shmi gave a small laugh. "A little one." Naruko noticed the simple clothes Shmi wore, dusty from years spent beneath the desert suns. Yet despite the harsh world around her, there was gentleness in her eyes and patience in every movement. Before Naruko could say anything else, her stomach growled loudly. Very loudly. Shmi blinked in surprise. Naruko grinned weakly. "Any chance you've got food too?" Shmi laughed properly this time, warm and bright. "I think I can manage that." And for the first time since arriving in this strange world, Naruko smiled for real. 9 years later. "Anakin. Careful with those tools." The cheerful warning echoed through Watto's workshop as a small boy ducked beneath a hanging engine part. Anakin Skywalker wiped grease from his cheek and flashed an innocent smile toward his mother. "I'm being careful." From atop a nearby pile of scrap metal, Naruko raised an eyebrow. "You said that last time too," she teased. Anakin grinned wider. "That wasn't my fault." It absolutely was. The workshop buzzed with sounds of clanking metal, humming engines, and distant podracers roaring across the desert. Sunlight streamed through the open doorway, turning floating dust into sparkling gold. Anakin hurried over to the damaged podracer resting in the yard outside. Though only 9 years old, he moved with surprising confidence. Machines made sense to him in a way few things did. He could look at a broken engine and somehow imagine exactly how it should fit together again. Naruko followed more slowly, carrying a small toolbox over one shoulder. The podracer looked rough. One engine was badly dented, and several wires hung loose from the cockpit controls. Anakin sighed dramatically. "Sebulba bumped me again." "Bumped?" Naruko snorted. Nice way of saying he drove like a bantha with its eyes closed. Anakin laughed. "He still cheats." "Yeah, but you're getting faster every race." The boy's smile faded just a little as he stared at the damaged machine. "Sometimes I think I'll never win." Naruko stepped beside him and gently ruffled his sandy hair. "Hey! You rebuilt a cooling turbine when you were 6. You built a protocol droid from spare parts. And you're the best pilot I've ever seen." Anakin looked up at her hopefully. "Really? Really?" Inside, Kurama huffed. "The kid's got spirit." Naruko smiled softly. She had grown used to life beneath Tatooine's twin suns. The desert no longer felt empty to her. It felt alive in its own quiet way. She had found a home here with Shmi and Anakin, and somehow, among broken machines and endless sand dunes, her heart had begun to heal. Anakin crouched beside the podracer engine, already studying the damage with focused blue eyes. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I think if we reroute the power coupling and lighten the stabilizers, it might actually go faster than before." Naruko blinked. "You figured that out already?" He shrugged proudly. "I had a good feeling." Naruko laughed warmly. Some things, she thought, never changed. For all the good it was doing him at the moment. For all the good, wait a minute. Anakin blinked, suddenly aware that something felt unusual. It was not danger, nor fear, but something warm and familiar, like hearing a favorite song carried on the desert wind. Someone was nearby. Someone he knew well. He drifted closer to the right engine pod and frowned. The machine was making sounds it definitely should not have been making. Clanks, rattles, and the scrape of tools echoed through the evening air beneath Tatooine's twin suns. Honestly, Adika, you really put this engine through a workout while I was away. Metal clinked softly. That's the last long trip I take for Django anytime soon. 3 whole months of dusty travel and cranky clients? No, thank you. Anakin's eyes widened as he heard the familiar words of Mandoa. There was only one person he knew who spoke like that. And there, poking out from behind the engine pod, was a messy bundle of bright blonde hair. A loud clang rang out. Oh, stars above. Another clang followed, along with a dramatic sigh. Anakin could barely stop himself from grinning. He knew that voice anywhere. He crept forward quietly. Don't even think about sneaking up on me, Annie. Before he could react, a pair of gloved hands gently spun him around. Anakin gasped in surprise before relaxing immediately at the sight of orange, black, and crimson armor. The Mandalorian helmet tilted playfully. A second later, the helmet's owner leaned out from behind the pod, revealing bright blue eyes, whisker-like markings on her cheeks, and a cheerful smile. Naruko Uzumaki looked exactly the same as always. Well? She asked with amusement. What did I tell you about trying to sneak around me? To not do it, Anakin admitted. That's right. Her smile widened. I leave for a few months to bring you new engine parts, and suddenly you think you can outsmart me? Anakin laughed softly. Can't blame me for trying. Maybe not. Naruko reached out from inside the engine compartment. Now hand me that hydrospanner before this whole thing rattles apart. Why can't you grab it? Because, she said patiently, I'm currently holding 2 important pieces together with one hand and balancing upside down with the other. There was a pause. And because I asked nicely. Anakin hurried to fetch the tool. As he handed it over, he glanced toward the armored figure standing behind him, and blinked. The second Naruko vanished in a puff of harmless white smoke. Anakin shook his head in amazement. Even after all these years, her strange technique still amazed him. You really have to teach me how to do that someday, he said eagerly. Naruko laughed from inside the engine pod. Sorry, kid. That's not something you can learn overnight. You made an exact copy of yourself. Yep. And it could talk. Also yep. And you said you could make hundreds. That too. Anakin stared at her in awe. Naruko climbed out of the engine compartment with practiced ease, brushing dust from her armored sleeves. The fading sunlight reflected warmly across the sturdy plates of her armor and the many gadgets attached to her belt. Her jetpack rested proudly against her back, polished from careful maintenance. To Anakin, she looked like a hero from one of the old stories travelers sometimes told in the marketplace. But more than that, Naruko represented something even greater. Freedom. She could travel anywhere among the stars. She answered to no master. She chose her own path every single day. Ever since Anakin was little, she had appeared and disappeared like a wandering comet, always returning with stories, spare parts, and gifts that made life feel brighter. She treated him kindly. She listened when he talked. And whenever his dreams felt too large for the tiny shop on Tatooine, she reminded him that the galaxy was enormous and full of possibilities. One day, she promised, he and his mother would see it together. Anakin believed her completely. Naruko wiped her gloves clean with a cloth and smiled down at him. You've gotten taller again, she said. You said that last time. And I was right then too. Anakin opened his mouth to answer. Rasa Dwi Kuppa, Pete Uncle. The sudden shout made him jump. Watto zoomed into the shop in a flutter of wings, muttering loudly in Huttese. The moment Naruko heard him approaching, she calmly lowered her helmet visor into place and stepped casually beside the engine pod. Watto pointed a clawed finger toward Anakin. You're daydreaming again, boy, he snapped. Do you know how much work there is to finish today? Anakin straightened immediately. He had heard these scoldings many times before. He stayed quiet and respectful, even as Watto continued grumbling dramatically about schedules, customers, and unfinished repairs. But this time felt different. Because Naruko was there. The armored woman folded her arms patiently while Watto complained. When he finally paused to catch his breath, she spoke in a calm, friendly voice. Actually, Annie was helping me repair the engine. And thanks to him, your pod is going to run smoother than ever. Watto blinked. The boy helped? He did, Naruko replied. You've got a talented mechanic here. Anakin tried not to smile too widely. Watto huffed, clearly unsure how to respond to praise from a famous traveler in Mandalorian armor. At last, he crossed his arms. Well, good repairs are good repairs, I suppose. Naruko nodded solemnly. Exactly. For a moment, silence settled over the dusty shop. Then Naruko leaned slightly toward Anakin and whispered just loudly enough for him to hear. Still sneaks too loudly, though. Anakin laughed before he could stop himself. And beneath the golden Tatooine suns, the shop suddenly felt a little warmer, a little brighter, and much more like home. I thought you wanted to be a pilot, Naruko said with a warm laugh, brushing a few golden strands of hair away from her face. Or a racer? Those two. Anakin replied quickly, grinning from ear to ear. Naruko shook her head, though there was clear fondness in her bright blue eyes. Without the helmet, she looked far less intimidating than she had moments ago. The dusty sunlight caught against the crimson edges of her armor, and for a moment she looked less like a bounty hunter and more like one of the wandering heroes from the stories Anakin's mother used to tell him before bedtime. Well, she sighed dramatically, placing her hands on her hips, you sure don't aim small, kid. Anakin puffed out his chest proudly. I'm going to build the fastest pod racer ever someday. Faster than all of them. I believe it, Naruko said immediately. The answer came so quickly and so honestly that Anakin blinked in surprise. Most adults laughed whenever he spoke about his dreams. Watto usually called them nonsense. But Naruko never laughed at him for things like that. She listened. Somehow, she always made his impossible ideas feel possible. The workshop grew quieter around them. Outside, the twin suns baked the streets of Mos Espa in shimmering heat, but inside the garage there was only the hum of broken engines and the smell of oil and sand. Naruko crouched beside him until they were eye level. All right, she said softly, show me your hands. Anakin obeyed at once. Naruko held out one gloved palm and balanced a tiny metal bolt on her fingertip. The little piece of scrap wobbled in place. Now, she said, this trick isn't about strength. It's about listening. Listening to what? The world. Anakin frowned in confusion. Naruko chuckled kindly. I know. Sounds weird. A little. She laughed again, bright and cheerful this time. The desert talks, she explained. The wind talks. Engines talk too, if you pay attention. Every machine has a rhythm. Every person too. Anakin stared at the tiny bolt. And that makes it float? Not exactly. Naruko tapped the center of his forehead gently. This part helps too. He crossed his eyes trying to look at where she touched him, earning another laugh from her. Close your eyes, she instructed. Anakin did. Take a deep breath. He inhaled slowly. Now imagine the bolt becoming lighter than sand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then. Clink. Anakin's eyes flew open as the tiny bolt lifted slightly off Naruko's glove before dropping back down again. His jaw nearly hit the floor. I did that? Maybe a little, Naruko admitted with a grin. That was amazing. Easy there. She stood up, laughing as he bounced excitedly beside her. You lifted it for half a second, not a whole starship. But still, she agreed warmly. Anakin could hardly stand still anymore. His mind raced faster than a podracer engine. If he could learn things like that, then maybe one day he really could leave Tatooine. Maybe he could become someone important. Someone who helped people. Naruko watched him carefully, and her expression softened. You've got a good heart, Anakin, she said quietly. Don't lose that, all right? The boy looked up at her. I won't. She smiled at him in a way that made him feel safe. From deeper inside the shop came Watto's loud voice. Naruko. Are you coming or not? Naruko groaned dramatically. And there goes the peaceful moment. Anakin snickered. She reached down and ruffled his hair again despite his protests. Hey. Tell your mom I'll stop by for dinner later, Naruko said. If Watto doesn't bore me to death first. He probably will. True. She nodded seriously. A terrible fate. Anakin laughed again. Naruko placed her helmet back on, hiding her face once more behind the familiar visor. Somehow, though, the armor didn't seem frightening to Anakin anymore. Not really. Beneath all the metal and gadgets was someone kind. Someone who protected people she cared about. As Naruko turned toward the shop entrance, she paused. "Oh, and kid? Yeah? If you keep practicing," she said, pointing at him playfully, "maybe someday you'll teach me a few tricks too." Anakin grinned so wide his cheeks hurt. For the rest of the day, even under the blazing desert suns, everything felt a little brighter. "Fine, fine." A soft sigh slipped past her lips, curling into a grin that carried both warmth and mischief. "You're a little younger than I was when I first tried this technique, but you'll be okay. Still." Naruko tilted her head dramatically, blue eyes sparkling beneath the shadow of her hood. "I should warn you before we begin. I'm an absolutely terrible teacher." Anakin swallowed hard as she gave him an exaggeratedly serious stare. Maybe learning mysterious ninja tricks from a wandering hunter was not the safest plan he had ever made. "Hunter? You coming or not?" Watto shouted from inside the shop, his rough voice echoing across the dusty street. Naruko snorted with laughter as if Watto's grumbling were the funniest thing she had heard all day. She crouched beside Anakin and ruffled his sandy hair again, her gloved hands surprisingly gentle. "We'll talk after dinner, kid." "You're staying?" Anakin blurted, nearly tripping over his own words in surprise. Naruko pulled her goggles down over her forehead and grinned. "Your mom would never forgive me if I skipped her cooking." Anakin laughed brightly. That much was true. Shmi Skywalker could make even the simplest meal taste wonderful, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. "Hunter," Watto yelled again. "If you don't get in here right now, I'm charging extra." Naruko straightened to her full height, stretching her arms with an exaggerated groan. "Coming, coming." She waved lazily as she started toward the shop, her long coat fluttering behind her in the evening breeze. "See you at dinner, Annie." "Yeah. See you." As she walked away, Anakin noticed something glimmering at Naruko's side. Curiosity tugged at him, and he leaned forward for a better look. A silver cylinder hung from her belt. His eyes widened. He had seen something like it before in old holovids and stories travelers told beneath the stars. Sleek. Polished. Elegant. A lightsaber. Anakin's thoughts spun faster than podracer engines. Only Jedi carried lightsabers. Didn't they? But Naruko wasn't like the Jedi in the stories. She laughed too loudly, wandered wherever she pleased, and somehow managed to get banned from half the marketplaces on Tatooine for excessive rooftop jumping. She fixed broken engines with dusty tools, played silly card games with children, and always shared her food with stray animals. So why did she carry a Jedi's weapon? The setting suns painted the desert gold as Anakin watched her disappear into Watto's shop. Questions swirled endlessly in his mind like sand caught in the wind. Who exactly was Uzumaki Naruko? And why did being around her feel like the beginning of a grand adventure? Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay connected for more content. Thank you for watching. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.